Thanks for your support as a channel member, Germat7046. Oscar Piastri beautifully won the Spanish Grand Prix to extend his championship lead to 10 points over McLaren teammate Lando Norris. But the big drama behind and the big talking point of this show is Max Verstappen, and should the reigning world champion have been disqualified? Hello folks, and welcome to my thoughts on the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix, won by Oscar Piastri ahead of his McLaren teammate Lando Norris, the first McLaren 1-2 in Spain since 1999, I think, if I'm correct. I know they hadn't locked out the front row since 98, I think in 99. Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard finished first and second, and yeah, they haven't achieved that since, although maybe in 2000, I know Häkkinen won it that year as well, but I cannot remember off the top of my head. That was a long time ago. Yes, Piastri extending his championship lead with a fabulous win, and we'll talk about that later, because first of all we need to discuss the big talking point. The reigning world champion Max Verstappen in the centre of the storm. So let's set the scene. Kimi Antonelli breaks down with about 12 laps to go. Everyone dives in for fresh tyres. Verstappen, who's run a 3-stop strategy to this point because the Red Bull needed to do something different to challenge the McLarens, which had superior pace. By this point, he's only got a fresh set of hard tyres remaining. No softs, no mediums. So it's kind of bitten him on the backside, his strategy here. But, you know, he's a world-class driver. Let's see what he can do with it. See if he can come home in a podium position. And I think he would have done, but for that big snap of oversteer on the restart coming through the final corner. It allowed Charles Leclerc to challenge him and get past. He was unhappy that the Ferrari driver made contact as they went down the straight on the charge down to turn 1. It allowed George Russell to insert his Mercedes into the battle. They made contact at turn 1. Verstappen was bumped off the road, and that's where it all began, because he was then told to give up the position to the Mercedes driver, and then he collided with George Russell as he appeared to cede the position, but also tried to take it back, it would seem. So let's rewind to that restart. First of all, the racing rules, they are stupid. I've said this before, it's dumb. But from what they say, George Russell had his car far enough alongside. You need your front wheels level with the wing mirrors of the car you're trying to overtake if you're on the inside. Yes, he did that. He stayed on the track. He didn't quite keep his car under control because of the turbulent wake coming from the Ferrari ahead. So it was a little bit of oversteer, bumped into Verstappen, who then took to the escape road. Now, what we'd seen throughout the race is that the stewards had investigated and would have applied penalties to drivers who had essentially retained position when they had lost the corner through cutting the corner, but taking to the escape road. So Oliver Bearman was bumped off by Liam Lawson earlier in the race, but Lawson had won the corner. So had the Kiwi driver not passed the Haas driver later on, I think there would have been a penalty incoming. So for Verstappen, he obviously felt he'd done everything right. He didn't feel George had won the corner, but Max, we've seen this before. When things are getting away from him, when he doesn't like how the race is unfolding, the red mist can come down, and boy did it. He was told to give up the position. He screamed absolutely not down the radio to his engineer. Then he appeared to do so. He appears to let George go ahead and then try to take it back at the same time and try and make a mockery of the rules. Now, for what it's worth, I think George Russell was just about in the right. He was far enough alongside. Yes, he didn't keep his car under control, but also Verstappen doesn't deserve to be bumped off the track in the first instance. So from my point of view, that's a play on, lads, because it's a safety car restart. Everyone's fighting for position. There's going to be lots of cars. It's going to get a little bit messy. I think you need to just sort of be a little bit more lenient with it, and unless someone has completely driven someone off the road and done something completely dastardly, stewards can just sort of be a bit more hands-off in that moment. But with the follow-up to that, Verstappen makes the contact, and they're not even at the apex. It's really strange. I felt at the time he'd used his car as a weapon I'm going to revise that and say he didn't, but it really wasn't becoming of a world champion. And I know we've seen Schumacher, Senna do crazy things when fighting other drivers, and they're still held in enormously high regard. And Verstappen is in a similar mould. I feel like Verstappen is the best and the worst of Senna and Schumacher at times, and I feel like this was the downside of it. Nico Rosberg called on the Sky Sports commentary for a black flag. Do I agree with that? No. I don't think it was black flag worthy. I think it was really, really dangerous and stupid. Because if he gets that wrong, that's 2 cars out of the race. He could be going over George Russell's car in that instance. There's a whole number of things that could go wrong. But the way that it panned out, let's have a look at it. 10 seconds for causing a collision? Fair enough. But we've seen Sebastian Vettel get a stop and go penalty in 2017 at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix for driving into Lewis Hamilton at a safety car restart. He pulled alongside and bashed his tyre into him at fairly low speed. It was fairly innocuous, to be honest, but the stewards on that day slapped him with basically the harshest penalty they could without yanking him out of the race. Ironically, he stayed ahead of Hamilton after that because Hamilton's headrest came loose in a weird quirk of fate. So we've seen the harsh penalties handed out. We saw it last week in Monaco. George Russell got hit with a drive-through. Was it a drive-through? I think it was a drive-through for the cutting the corner and deliberately gaining an advantage at the chicane. I think a stop and go would have sufficed because it lays down the law in terms of that's not acceptable. You cannot have drivers driving into each other deliberately because that is a recipe for disaster. And I think we were fortunate not to come away with 2 cars in 1,000 pieces because of it. And the only loser from all of this, from Verstappen losing his head, because we've seen it before, he does lose his head when he's under pressure. Think back to Austria last year when Norris was coming and was probably going to win that race without some of Verstappen's antics, and other occasions during the title fight with Lewis Hamilton. Jeddah 2021 springs to mind. It's just, he loses his head and he is the loser out of most of these situations, and today he is the big loser. Oscar Piastri has scored 25 points. Lando Norris has scored 18 points. They're separated by 10 points. Verstappen is 49 points behind, and he was straining every sinew just to stay in touch. So barring a McLaren disaster, Max Verstappen has now lost the World Championship. This moment has cost him the World Championship, because had he finished 3rd or 4th, or even if he'd just settled for 5th, he would have still been within striking distance. Yes, McLaren could trip over each other and bring him back into play, but realistically, are they going to allow that to happen? I don't think so. Max Verstappen has just blown his World Championship hopes for 2025. His run of 4 straight titles is over. 49 points. It's a big margin. 2 wins. There's no fastest lap point. Yes, there's a few sprint races coming up, but McLaren has the fastest car, and teams will be turning their attentions to 2026. And Red Bull will be needing to prepare for that year because they're making their own engine alongside Ford. So Verstappen has shot himself in the foot with all of this in his desperation to stay in touch. I've always said Verstappen needs to keep the big picture in mind, and he'd been doing a really good job of that last year in terms of knowing that the McLaren was generally a faster car at most circuits and picking off those wins where he could. And he'd done the same this year. You know, Jeddah aside, where he really should have just given up the position to Piastri and then cracked on from there because he might still have won the race. But today, he's thrown it all down the toilet. So, I have spoken to you for almost 10 minutes about Max Verstappen. I want you to tell me whether you think Max Verstappen should have been disqualified or not. And if you don't think so, was the 10 seconds enough, or should it have been more, like I feel it maybe should have been? But let's talk about the McLarens. Very, very good performance from them. The flexi wing debate, water off a duck's back. They flexed their muscles like they were Terry Crews, and he was there doing the post-race interviews, which was pretty cool. So yeah, stiffer wings, no problem, say McLaren. We'll just be even faster. So what a job that team has done. 2 years ago they were bottom of the constructors table. Now they are, without a shadow of a doubt, the best team in Formula One. And as a young man who grew up in the Surrey area, McLaren was my local team. They were about 40 minutes away from where I grew up. So they're a team very close to my heart. It's a brilliant thing to see. McLaren, after all the struggles of the Honda years and the Renault, and then rebuilding with Mercedes again, and the tricky times with Daniel Ricciardo, now they've got a sensational driver pairing, very closely matched. And it is Oscar Piastri who's making the most of this car, but Lando Norris is no slouch. There are still a few bits that Lando can tidy up on. Racecraft can definitely be better. Race pace could maybe be improved. He needs to hone the qualifying speed in this car. Piastri is dynamite over one lap in this machine, but he's come on leaps and bounds as well, and you saw that today. When push came to shove, Piastri was able to pull the gap, and they just left everyone else behind because there was so much action going on, you almost forgot that the McLarens were about to win the race. So that's how you want it. You want to disappear into the distance, basically not be seen on the telly, because that means you're killing the race for the victory by making it super boring, and then just pop up at the end and, hey, we've won, hooray, we get all the trophies, and then move on to the next race and do the same thing. And McLaren are doing an amazing job. Andrea Stella is, I think, a very, very good team principal. He toes the line in terms of the controversial incidents. He's happy for the drivers to race, but he demands excellence and, I'd say, I won't say adhesion, but obeying rules. You know, that this is how we go racing. We will not tolerate anything outside of that. And the drivers are very well aware of it. But now that it's going to be a straight fight between them, the pressure's going to ramp up. And we saw it in qualifying. Norris trying to steal a toe from Piastri. It was just a quirk of circumstance, but that might not be by accident next time. So watch out for those two just starting to turn their heads and looking at each other now that Max Verstappen isn't going to be so much of a problem in the championship fight. He'll still be a problem on race day, and he can still influence where this championship goes, but he's still a threat, because next race in Canada, both McLarens could be in the wall. You never know. And Verstappen wins, and it's game back on. But if things continue as they are, it's Piastri versus Norris. And really, that's the fight I wanted to see this year. Those two going at it and start slugging it out. Sort of Mercedes style from the 2014-2016 era. Hamilton and Rosberg. I don't think it'll get as sort of vicious and dirty as that one did, but I think this will be really, really fun because it will test their relationship. And I think you might see a different side to both drivers. And I think if you were looking to cast almost a villain who would be very happy to be the villain and just not care about it, I think Oscar Piastri would be a very good, like in a film context, a very good villain, like an anti-hero sort of thing. So that's not to say Oscar Piastri is going to turn to the dark side and start doing dirty things to other drivers. He's absolutely not. But I just think, you know, he'll be very okay with operating a bit more in that grey area and being a bit more sort of ruthless about things. He's already shown he's very, very good in that aspect. So, yeah, it's McLaren's title to lose. They've probably already won the Constructors' title, to be honest. So, Piastri or Norris, where is this one heading? We've got, 9 rounds in? We've got 13 rounds to go. Unlucky for some. Who is it going to be unlucky for from here in McLaren's driver lineup? Now, just before I go, let's rate the race and give an alternative driver of the day. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10 because up until the safety car, it was kind of a bit, you kind of knew what was going to happen. Still enough intrigue and interest with the strategy. Would Red Bull's 3-stop work? How could they get themselves into play? didn't quite materialise though. The final sort of 6 laps was very fun. that was exciting. Driver of the day was actually Max Verstappen. I think a lot of those votes went to him before the big tantrum. But anyway, I don't like how that's done. Alternative driver of the day, you can't look further than Nico Hülkenberg. Come on. He dragged a Sauber to P5 at the Spanish Grand Prix of all places. Honestly, that guy is a genius. What a drive. He even overtook Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari. That was brilliant from the Hulk. So yeah, he's my alternative driver of the day. So before I go, a few questions for you. Was the penalty for Verstappen enough? Who wins the championship? Rate the race. Alternate driver of the day. Get yourselves in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys. You're the best fans. It's bye for now.